we want to turn our attention to hurling, and I'm delighted to say James Skehill is with us. James, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Morning, James. Thanks for having me.
The Galway performance at the weekend against Limerick, a lot obviously made in the aftermath of John Kiley's comments, and less of an opportunity really given that to actually talk about the quality of what we saw. This is definitely one of those years where the condensed championship means that any confidence a team gets, any partnerships that build up, any style of play that evolves quickly in the league, you should be able to catapult that into the championship. So with that in mind, Galway must be pretty happy with what they saw at the weekend.
Yeah, like it was a funny type of game, you know. Like I suppose I was watching it during the first half, and if I didn't see the scoreboard, I would have thought Limerick were winning. You know, it's just that was the way the patterns of play were turning out. I thought Garrett Hegarty was running them off in the first half, but nonetheless, like Galway went in 3 or 4 points up at half time. They'd be pleasantly delighted, to be honest. They needed to beat Limerick. We've played Limerick a couple of times over the last number of years and had them out not on top. So that was a good victory for Shane O'Neill to get, and it's great for momentum. I suppose a lot of the newspaper lines that were in over the last couple of days were dominated by John Kiley's comments, and that's fair enough. But Shane O'Neill won't, with respect, he won't care about that. He is 2 from 2 and he's sitting nicely on top of the league. It's
kind of the perfect scenario where you beat the All-Ireland champions and everybody's talking about something that happened that either did or didn't happen, and it's kind of largely irrelevant in the long run. But what is relevant is that you've found something that will give your team confidence the next time they come up against Limerick. Yeah, that's huge. You know, I just said a moment ago, like, momentum is huge. You know, like you look at that's the league game this year. We played them last year, let's say, and the championship came out. It didn't go well, let's say, the All-Ireland final in 2018. So we've needed a victory against Limerick. You know, that was great for, I know it's momentum now, but come the championship, and I'm sure these two teams will cross again, that Galway needed that victory to know that they can get over the line in Limerick, which was most likely going to be a semi-final or final, I think.
You mentioned the games over the last couple of years there, 2018 and last year. From being inside in that Galway camp, was there a feeling that you guys were best placed to take down this Limerick machine because of the physicality that your guys had?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I suppose you look at the Limerick team, their stature, they're very, very well built guys, and I would have thought, to say, while we were, you know, contesting with them over the last couple of years, that Galway were best placed. You know, we've big guys, big stature, fit, strong people in every line of the field. To say, when you match up Limerick and Galway, the matchups tend to prove very entertaining. To say, and it's the way the game has kind of gone at the moment. You know, Limerick have produced a new game over the last 4 or 5 years under John Kiley, and it's everyone else's job to catch up. And I think Galway are the only team that can, at the minute, Galway are the only team that can contest with them.
From a tactical perspective, right, it was interesting, the Limerick worked the ball through the lines, and so therefore there's more physical exchanges, and so therefore there are more frees, was the view of one of the referees recently in the Examiner. And I'm just interested in how Galway would have prepared for those games where you know what's coming, you know that the stick work is going to lead to physical altercations, and that Limerick are backing themselves to win those, and that's where over the course of 74, 75, 76 minutes they're going to win the game. How do you prepare for that, and what do you do to try and stop that happening?
Well, firstly, you have to know what you're playing, and I know Limerick, I suppose the first word that comes to Limerick, to people's minds when they talk of Limerick, is physical. But also beyond that, let's say, they're absolutely excellent stick players. You know, in every line of the pitch, when you look at Sean Finn, Declan Hannon, Keane Lynch, carry through all those lines, they're fantastic stick players. So you've got to get in their face. You know, you can't allow Limerick any time and space to be popping balls out to wings, giving Hegarty like a space to run into, giving Kyle Hayes channels to go up. So really it becomes a case of neutralising that effect. And that's very difficult to do because they're so fit and strong, but you've got to front up against them heavy. Really, really front up against them heavy. What we tried last year was to create a 7 defender almost. We brought back in a midfielder trying to crowd out the forward line because we knew their full forward in the likes of Aaron Gillette and Peter Casey, these guys, they want a space to run into the 13 and 15 corner. So we tried to make it was a war zone in the middle third. When you look at Limerick of 16, 17, they were hitting balls into the forwards from, let's say, 30 yards back, and that was allowing opposition half-back lines to cut it out. What they've done now in 17, 18, 19, 20 is they've moved that transition of play. So where they're hitting the ball from now is from their half-back line up, getting it into the 13 and 15 corner and creating huge damage. And even if Gillette and the likes are getting caught in the corners, they have a fantastic outball in Morrissey and Hegarty. So what we tried to do was blockade that line up front, stop them getting past the 30-yard line, try get them to deliver the ball under pressure up in the forwards, and then hope that will give our guys a chance, you know, for a 50-50 ball. It doesn't quite work out that way. What Limerick are excellent do is they're excellent at readjusting their game plan. So that's why the water breaks it's another topic entirely, but the water breaks provides Paul Knock a fantastic opportunity to reset his team and analyse the situation, what's going on, and then adjust. And I don't think anyone's caught onto it at the minute how to actually beat Limerick in the heat of a championship game. But as I said earlier on, I think Galway best place to do it in future.
So what is the readjustment you tend to see then?
So generally what Limerick can do is they go 15 on 15 and they're like suss you out, you know. And I suppose they'll make a slight personal adjustment. They nearly give Hegarty and Morrissey a free role to create a bit of chaos. So what you'll find now is Hegarty and Morrissey, they won't play in the traditional 10 and 12. You'll find them 11, 8, 9, different pockets of space. And it's very, very difficult for a defensive setup to come out after a water break or even half time to try and neutralise that. And I think they're giving with a free role. That's what they're playing with at the minute. Morrissey and Hegarty play with a free role. You can see they don't have a care in the world at the moment. And that's why they're playing so well, essentially. And it's very hard to see when you're on the pitch as a group of players, it's very hard to adjust. So when you see let's say, for example, the first quarter and the second quarter is entirely different. It's very hard for a team to adjust that. And that's why if you look at the second quarter, Limerick usually dominate. And on the fourth quarter, they do the same thing as well. And that was proven in the Water final last year.
I mean, it's really interesting to hear you talk about this because, like, knowing all that, right? How do you stop it? And getting their faces is great, and then they come out after the water break, and suddenly everything has changed again. Like, you kind of need to almost have some artificial intelligence in your own team to go, okay, this is the reset that they've done, and we've seen this before.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer. I would class myself as a bit of an analyst when it comes to looking at hurling games, and Limerick are a team that just haven't quite figured out yet. You know, I'm looking at Nicky Quaid and his puck-out strategy, and it looks simplistic in its form, but I still haven't figured out how an opposition team would neutralise it. Because a huge platform that Limerick have is from their puck-out. That's the first thing you have to do with Limerick, is you just stop their puck-out, you stop their primary ball winners, and that's essentially Hegarty and Morrissey. I know I keep referencing back to those two, but they're the two key players for Limerick, and they make them tick. And how do you stop it? I'm not quite sure at the minute. You know, I suppose from Galway's perspective, they have players, I just mentioned a while ago, they have players in the Coffmanians, Conor Wheel and Brian Cannon that can go front up, toe-to-toe with Limerick. So it's really trying to implement your own game plan as best possible. So, like, when you look at the likes of, in the background, Dahi Burke and Gareth McInerney, etc., you've got defenders who have the quality to take care of Limerick if enough pressure can be put on the middle third. So that middle third has become essentially a war zone at the moment in hurling terms. And that's where a lot of the frees have been committed. You put 45 to 45. An awful lot of the issues that you've seen highlighted over the past week or two are with rugby-style tackles, with arms in, slaps. And it's because there's so many bodies in the middle third. So with that middle third, you've got to win that battle. And essentially, if you win that, it's like the scrum in rugby. You win the scrum, you win the game. So
managers don't care about you giving away frees if they feel like it's wearing down the opposition over the course of the match. They're almost willing to accept that there'll be 5 or 6 frees conceded, but the trade-off is that there'll be 10 or 15 tackles that you can't get penalised for because the referee's not going to blow everything, and over the course of the game, that nullifies the effect.
Correct. Like, and you look at, inter-county games, it's always a question of the spectacle versus the rules in my book. So again, we look at last weekend and the Galway Limerick game in particular, an awful lot of the frees that were given away were very, very technical frees. There were arm pulls, there were slaps, there were slight body checks. You know, managements will be allowed to, you will actually promote that. You're promoting to increase physicality in the middle third with the understanding you're going to give away frees. So if you can give away a free from the opposition's, let's say, 30-yard line back, the threat there is not exactly massive. You can allow your team, your defensive, to set up again and then create a 50-50 opportunity to come in. So, and it's the same thing with the short puck outs. You see them, what teams don't want to do it nowadays is puck the ball long because they know the defences are back there and they've got numbers back there. So if a puck out goes short, what you can do is invite the opposition onto you, and if needs be, use the sideline as your defender and then foul. And again, it forces the team then to go long where you have numbers at the back. You know, so it's a tricky one at the minute because you look at. I was just saying about the spectacle. You know, as a spectator, we'd have all been disappointed. You know, the hurling fanatics would have been disappointed with what games we saw at the weekend. But again, I have to side on the element of the referees. What players have done over the last couple of years is they've pushed the boundaries. So essentially, they've been getting away with the arm pulls. They've been getting away with the slaps and slight body checks in the interest of the spectacle. And I think referees at the moment, what helps them is there's no crowds. If that was a Munster Championship game or an Ireland semi-final, an awful lot of the frees that you've seen over the course of the league would not be given because the crowd would be going crazy. So yeah, that's another interesting topic to debate.
No, I think you're bang on. The really intriguing tactical conversation around last weekend was Tip's approach to Cork. Obviously, Cork have got a new goalkeeper this season. What was your take on that? First of all, the decision by Tipperary to surrender the short puck out to Cork.
Yeah, it was kind of a funny one. Like, I think I have to look at the Cork's perspective first. So again, if I'm putting myself in Kieran Kingston's shoes, I would look to Cork over the history in the last number of years, and they would have got ridiculed with regard to poking the ball long, no ball winners, and not creating goal chances. So here they are now, 2 games in with 6 goals scored, and so that's predominantly from my perspective, it's on the back of a short puck out strategy. So what they've done is they've created a strategy for themselves that suits themselves. What I think should have happened is Tip should have pushed up, went man on man, and forced Cork to put the ball down on top of Heffernan, Hardy Maher, Ronan Maher, these guys who have huge height advantages over Cork. But they just sat off too deep. They invited Cork to attack them and set up Cork's game plan. Which I think, when you look at the minute, if they meet in the Munster Championship game again, I think that, and anyone meets Cork, they've got to press Cork. You've got to go 15 on 15 against Cork and force them into a physical battle. What Cork don't like, again, in my opinion, is they don't like 50-50 challenges. They don't like the ball, let's say, going into a neutral zone where it was evenly contested. They want space. They want their guys to get on the ball and let hurling do the work. Whereas other teams, Galway, for example, they want to mix hurling and physicality, whereas I don't think Cork can mix that at the minute.
So why don't Tip push up then?
That's a good question. It's a great question. I don't know. It's because when you consider that Tip, again, the scoreline doesn't do it exact justice. So Tip turned over Cork a good bit. Now, I know the conditions didn't let it, there was rain and wind, etc. But Tip had an unmerciful amount of wides, and they just didn't do it on the scoreboard. If I'm Liam Sheedy looking at that game, I'm quite content. You know, we haven't been beaten, essentially, and there's loads to work on from their perspective. But I don't know, it could be Liam Sheedy. I think he's looking at that, and he's probably looking at the middle third of Cork and Timo Mahoney and the half-forward Robbie O'Flynn, etc., and saying there's danger there, so they wanted to pack out the middle thirds I spoke about again. And that's what most team managers are doing at the minute. They're nearly afraid of the threat of goals coming. Because essentially, if you get goals, you're winning games nearly. So what's trying to do is block off that, as I said, from the 65 back. I think that's the main reason why Tip introduced that tactic. Why they didn't push up? Interesting.
Isn't the other thing, though, that everybody's trying to build a team to stop Limerick? So what Tipperary are doing against Cork in the league is trying to come up with a format and style of play that is actually designed with one match in mind, really.
Yeah. I agree with you.
It's a bit like the Dubs in football. You have to have a style of play that's going to beat Dublin. There's no point winning everything else because you're just going to get hammered in the big game against the champions.
Like what you're essentially doing is, specifically in the league and the championship, you've got one eye on who's the standard bearer at the minute. And if you go through games trying to win each game with an individual game plan, you're essentially delaying the inevitable when you meet Limerick, because you won't have a game plan that has been practiced, tried and tested, or even proven. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. When I'm looking at Galway, I have to go back to Galway again. What they seem to do is trying to implement a game plan that's going to take down Limerick, because who's knocked them out the last couple of years? Obviously, it's been Limerick. And maybe that's what Tipperary are doing, because again, what you don't want Limerick to do, or what you don't want against Limerick, is you don't want to be given the ball, let Nicky Quaid poke it into 10 and 12 and give it to Keane Lynch. So you're trying to block off that area and create as many bodies and limit space and essentially create pandemonium with so many bodies in there. Hence why the short puck out is so relevant now at the moment, especially with Cork.
Can I just ask, as a goalkeeper, when you see the opposition drop off, are you rubbing your hands together thinking brilliant, or are you thinking they want me to do this and maybe I shouldn't do that thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose when you ask me that question, I instantly think of a Leinster final we played in 2018 in Croke Park against Kilkenny. And I suppose our team at the time would have been very physical, very tall, great ball winners for primary possession. And we'd have had Johnny Glynn in the half-forward line, who we know is essentially a man mountain. But what Kilkenny would have done at the time, and it was interesting for me looking out, was they would have put 3 or 4 bodies on Johnny Glynn's side, and they would have essentially vacated the far side. So they were nearly tempting me to go down the opposite wing, not to have the ball to Johnny Glynn, because if I did put it to Johnny Glynn, who's our primary ball winner, they had 3 or 4 bodies to neutralise his threat. So what they were doing was trying to put me down the far side. And I think when you look at teams nowadays, especially with someone who are as physical as, for example, Tipperary, I'm using Cork as an example now, they're sharp out. You look out, you see Hardy Maher, Ronan Maher, Seamus Kennedy, Barry Heffernan. They're all 6'4 plus. What you don't want to do is land the ball down top of those guys. It sings of what you used to have against Kilkenny in years previous with JJ and Tommy. What you want to do is come up with a game plan that you can go shorter to go over them. The best direction you want those guys, especially in Tipperary, is going back towards their own goal. And the only way you do that, I think, is if you play multi-phase, i.e. start the ball short and go and get over them. Putting the ball down top of them, it's not 50-50, it's essentially 70-30 into their favour.
It's amazing, isn't it, how the game has completely reacted to that half-back line and that spine of your defence becoming so important in hurling.
Absolutely. Like you'll hear the phrase an awful lot with goalkeepers with regards to quarterback, and essentially that's what they are. You know, they have the most possessions in the games nowadays, so they're basically starting the attack. So if you're putting an attack and send it down to the opposition's best players, because predominantly your number 6, 5, 6, 7 nowadays are 3 of your best players. You're not really giving your team an advantage, so what you're trying to do is, as a goalkeeper, trying to assess what's in front of you, obviously, from a long and short game. And again, the same thing is, if you had a team that pushes up to you and goes man on man, then that creates space. So as a defender, you can either mark the space or you can mark the man. You can't do both. So, but that's why the goalkeeper nowadays is such a pivotal position. Like, that goalkeeper has got to assess that. He's looking at this in real time. He's not getting fed information. He's not getting plays stopped like you see in NFL and getting information put into him and wired up. So he's doing everything in real time. That's why the position now is, the difficulty level of playing goalkeeper has just increased, tenfold over the last couple of years.
Last question for you here, because we're nearly out of time. But what about Cork? Because there's a sense they're zigging a little bit while everybody else is zagging, and that they're trying to come up with their own identity, which they think will work against Limerick, but will also work against the other teams, because they're not guaranteed that they're going to be in the biggest games of the year against Limerick. Yeah,
well, it's a case of with Cork, let's say, over the last number of years, you do what you've always done, you get what you always got. So what they're trying to do now is change it up and put a focus on a new type game plan. We've seen Cork with the short ball over, it seems like a lifetime ago now, in 0-3 and 0-4 is how they got around the Great Kilkenny team back then. And I think they're trying to re-implement that now at the moment. It suits their style of play. They've got lovely hurlers. You go down to every pitch in Cork, the surface in every pitch is fantastic, and they're all hurlers. They don't really have the big physical men who can contest with the big half backlines, contest with the hard midfields. They had no Harnedy the last day. They had no Patrick Cronin or an Aidan Walsh. So they're going to have to do something that suits them. And that's why the short ball is introduced. And they are getting a lot of ridicule. You'll see on Twitter and social media over the weekend, they were getting ridiculed by the fanatics who want a better spectacle. But if I'm putting myself in Kieran Kingston's shoes as a manager, I'm trying to win the game. It's a results-driven business. And that's through the short ball at the moment, to suit your guys and suit your team. Cork has such pace. They have such hurlers that they can move guys around the pitch. We're talking about big bodies. We're talking about Tipperary, Limerick, Galway, big bodies. The best thing to do is make that ball move and get them big bodies wearing out by having chased the ball. So I think Cork, in my opinion, should keep doing what they're doing, try and perfect the game over the course of the next league, and it'll give them a nice run in the championship. Yeah,
and it will, as we all know, styles make fights, and having somebody else doing something different is a brilliant live experiment for us all to watch unfold over the course of the summer. James, that was brilliant. Thanks a million.
No bother, guys. Thanks for having me, okay?
It's a brilliant analysis there from James Skehill, giving us an insight into what it's like to be in goals on those big days